The training grounds of Crucible Base were alive with chaos at least to anyone watching from the ground. Plasma weapons hissed, energy shields flared in neon bursts, and alien cadets twisted through aerial maneuvers that would have shredded a human body. The air thrummed with tension, each vibration echoing off the alloyed walls of the enormous dome. But high above the melee, on a shadowed observation platform, stood Commander Lyris, silent as stone. Her eyes, violet and unblinking, tracked every movement, muscle, exoskeleton, or appendage. Nothing escaped her gaze. Cadets froze mid-strike when her attention fell on them. Even the most confident aliens felt the weight of it. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't offer encouragement. She simply observed, a silent sentinel, the embodiment of discipline and control, amid the symphony of precision. One figure stumbled, human, Cade, Ren. His movements were uncoordinated, a tangle of flailing limbs and near misses. He tripped over his own feet while attempting a simple combat roll, narrowly avoiding a sparking energy barrier. A small crowd of aliens whispered in disbelief. Some snickered. Others shook their heads in disgust. Humans were notorious for unpredictability, and Cade seemed to personify it. Yet, for all his fumbling, he refused to stop. Each failure was met with stubborn persistence. He got up, shook himself off, and lunged back into the fray, eyes blazing with determination. Lyris's gaze, usually cold and impenetrable, lingered on him. Something about the human's resilience, his unwillingness to yield, caught her attention. Not admiration, not yet. Curiosity. Again, she muttered under her breath. Barely audible, it was a whisper so faint it might have been mistaken for the hum of the dome's energy grid. Yet it marked the first audible reaction she had shown in weeks. Her lips, otherwise a hard line of discipline, twitched slightly, a micro-expression she almost immediately suppressed. Cade didn't notice. He was too busy scrambling through a complex sequence of simulated combat, dodging holographic grenades and leaping over energy barriers. Sparks flew from his suit whenever he clipped the edges of the course, illuminating his face in flashes of blue and orange. His heart pounded, muscles screamed, but he refused to give in. From the observation deck, Lyris's mind assessed every misstep and improvised recovery. Every twitch of Cade's shoulders, every uneven landing, every moment he nearly faltered, but didn't, was logged, noted, analyzed. She had faced thousands of cadets over centuries, but there was something different about this human. Not skill-high, was unskilled, even clumsy, but the way he refused to quit, the way he embraced the absurdity of his own failures, intrigued her. A sudden shift of a holographic obstacle sent Cade tumbling again, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. He could have crashed into a live energy barrier, a fatal mistake in most species. Lyris's hand twitched. Instinctively, her training told her to intervene, but she didn't. He landed awkwardly, rolling to absorb the impact, and sprang back up, grinning through the pain. That grin, the audacious, reckless, human grin, was what finally made Lyris's lips curl, ever so slightly, into a hint of amusement. She looked away quickly, as if embarrassed that she had noticed at all. And yet, something had changed. The silent observer had been stirred not by skill, not by protocol, but by something wholly human: stubbornness, hope, and the sheer audacity to stand against overwhelming odds. The zero-gravity training chamber hummed with artificial atmosphere, a lattice of glowing energy conduits stretching across the vast interior. Cadets of every species darted between obstacles, flipping, twisting, and firing simulated rounds that hissed through the air like liquid fire. Each move was precise, rehearsed, a ballet of lethal grace. Cade Ren was not graceful. He bounced off a magnetic wall, limbs flailing as he struggled to orient himself. A series of spinning plasma rings loomed ahead, each one pulsing with deadly light. The human hesitated, then lunged, miscalculating his jump. Time slowed at least in the mind of the silent observer above. From the shadowed observation deck, Commander Lyris's violet eyes narrowed. Her posture remained rigid, her expression impassive, but every fiber of her being tensed. Humans were unpredictable, home reckless, and this one had a habit of testing limits. She did not condone. Cade's trajectory was off. His momentum carried him toward a glowing platform, sparking dangerously where exposed energy conduits crisscrossed. Any misstep could have sent him careening into live circuits, triggering a disabling shock. For a heartbeat, the chamber seemed to hold its breath. And then, Lyris moved. Not a shout, not a gesture, just a leap. Her movement was effortless, a shadow detached from darkness. In midair, she intercepted Cade, catching him with one arm, her other hand steadying him against the magnetic field. Sparks danced around them, illuminating her sharp features, and for a fleeting moment, the air between them crackled not with static, but with unspoken awareness. Cade's face was a mixture of shock and awe, his body stiff as he clung to the Vakari officer. Thanks, he stammered, struggling to find words as his heartbeat thundered in his chest. Lyris didn't respond immediately. She released him, stepping back to let gravity or its artificial equivalent reclaim him. Her gaze lingered, assessing, analyzing, and then, almost imperceptibly, a faint exhalation escaped her, a soft, almost amused sigh. She didn't smile, not yet, but for the first time, the human had breached the fortress of her silence. The other cadets watched in stunned silence, jaws slack and eyes wide. Not because she had intervened, that was expected, but because of what she hadn't done. Reprimand. Lyris, rarely, if ever, allowed a cadet to survive a mistake without correction, let alone with amusement in her eyes. Cade stumbled to steady himself, brushing sparks from his suit. I think I got it now, he muttered, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. Lyris's eyes didn't waver. Try not to fall again, she said. Her voice clipped, measured, but there was something beneath the surface, a subtle curiosity that hadn't been there before. As Cade continued through the obstacle course, he moved cautiously, yet his characteristic persistence shone through. Each jump, each rotation, each near miss seemed to draw her attention. He wasn't the most skilled cadet, nor the fastest, but he refused to quit. That defiance, that audacity, was something she had seen rarely in all her years of training alien warriors. For Lyris, it was unsettling, and yet intriguing. Later, when the chamber quieted and cadets were dismissed, Cade lingered, staring up at the observation platform where she stood. Commander?" he called, voice hesitant. Lyris didn't answer. She only observed, silent again, but not without thought. Somewhere deep inside, a seed of curiosity had been planted, a recognition that this human, despite his clumsiness and chaos, carried a spark worth noting. The artificial stars of Crucible Base flickered faintly against the dark dome overhead, painting the training grounds in cold, sterile light. Most cadets had already retreated to their quarters, leaving the massive facility eerily silent, except for the soft hum of power conduits and the occasional hiss of venting air. Ren, however, was still out there, moving alone. His suit flickered with errant sparks every time he misjudged a jump or landed awkwardly, the faint blue arcs illuminating his determined face. A low wind simulated the vacuum of deep space, tugging at his movements and threatening to unbalance him as he navigated a complex agility course designed to push even seasoned alien warriors to their limits. From the observation deck above, Commander Lyris watched. Her violet eyes, sharp and calculating, tracked every stumble, every micro-adjustment of his limbs. She had returned to her usual silence, but tonight, something was different. Her attention lingered longer, more focused. Normally, humans bored herd. They were too reckless, too unrefined, too unpredictable to merit more than passing notice. But Cade's persistence was a kind of chaos she couldn't look away from. He misstepped again, falling into a simulated chasm with a loud clatter. Sparks danced around him as his suit's magnetic stabilizers barely kept him from tumbling into the obstacle's edge. And yet, almost instinctively, he twisted, rolled, and landed upright, brushing off sparks like dust from his shoulder. A faint exhalation escaped Lyris, not a laugh, not quite. But the tension in her body shifted imperceptibly, her rigid posture loosening by the tiniest fraction. She didn't intervene. That was her rule. Let cadets fail. Let them learn or die trying. But she could not deny the subtle pull of curiosity. Cade froze for a moment, as if sensing he wasn't alone. His eyes scanned upward, toward the observation platform. Commander," he called tentatively, voice cracking slightly in the cavernous chamber. "I mean, did you see that?" Lyris didn't respond. Her eyes, however, followed him like a predator tracking its prey, but to study. She noticed how his fingers gripped the edges of the course with tension, how he calculated each jump in milliseconds, how his jaw clenched as failure threatened to knock him down. There was something almost admirable in his stubbornness, something that made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't felt in centuries. The chamber grew darker as a storm of sparks from the nearby electrical training rigs arced across the floor, sending jagged shadows dancing across Cade's face. He misjudged another leap, flailing midair, and for a second, it looked as if he would crash spectacularly into a high-voltage panel. Lyris's hand twitched, a reflex born of habit, but she held it there. She let him fall, then rise again, her silent gaze locking onto his dot. When Cade landed, ungraceful but upright, he grinned a daring, reckless human grin that made Lyris blink once. That grin, it was audacious, absurd, and alive, and for a fleeting heartbeat, something in her chest shifted. He tried a clumsy salute. "Guess I got it this time?" His voice wavered, but his eyes sparkled with triumph. She didn't smile. Not yet. But something like curiosity, tinged with disbelief, lingered in her expression. A spark had been ignited, a small, dangerous spark that threatened to pull her out of the fortress of discipline she had built around herself as the night deepened. Cade continued his drills, unaware that the silent observer above was quietly intrigued. The flickering shadows, the hum of electricity, the rhythmic thumps of his boots, they all became a quiet symphony that Lyris could not tear her eyes away from. The tactical briefing room was alive with tension. Holographic battle maps flickered across the walls, displaying jagged asteroid fields, enemy drone swarms, and simulated combat zones that would test the skill of even veteran warriors. Alien cadets shifted nervously, whispering among themselves, their multi-limbed forms tense as they watched Commander Lyris glide silently into the room. Her violet eyes scanned the assembly like a predator measuring prey, and then silence fell. "Human Cadet Cade Wren," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a laser. Every head turned, every eye focused. Cade's stomach dropped. Humans were rarely singled out, and never in this way. Lead the upcoming tactical simulation. A shocked gasp ran through the room. Cadets from multiple species froze mid-breath. Humans had no reputation for leadership here. They were unpredictable, unrefined, a liability in high-stakes simulations. Assigning one to lead a team of seasoned veterans was unheard of. Cade swallowed hard. His mind raced, heart hammering against his ribs. He had trained for this, yes, but only in theory. In practice, he was a novice surrounded by prodigies. Yet, he nodded. "Understood, Commander." The simulation chamber transformed around them. Holographic drones erupted from the ceiling, filling the room with arcs of glowing plasma. Asteroid walls shifted and rotated, forming impossible mazes. Sparks hissed and shimmered in the air as Cade's team of alien cadets braced themselves. Eyes wary of the human now in command, Lyris observed from the side, her arms crossed, expression unreadable. She had seen humans survive by sheer luck and audacity, but could this one orchestrate strategy? Could he guide others without causing disaster? The thought made her pulse tighten with suspense. Cade hesitated for a heartbeat, scanning the chaos. His mind worked like lightning. Traditional tactics would fail against these odds. And humans thrived on improvisation. "Cover the left flank," he shouted, pointing toward a corridor where holographic drones swarmed. "Use the debris for shields, then converge at the nexus." His voice was raw, unpolished, but it carried authority. The alien cadets hesitated. Doubt flickered in their eyes. But then, instinctively, they followed. Cade's orders were unconventional, bold, unpredictable, but they worked. Plasma bolts missed. Drones collided with the environment, and slowly, the simulation shifted from near defeat to narrow victory. From the observation deck, Lyris's lips twitched, not a smile, not fully but enough to betray her intrigue. She had witnessed thousands of simulations, yet never had a human cadet turned chaos into triumph so deftly. One of her comments slipped, quiet but sharp. "Not bad. For a human." The words were unexpected, and Cade froze for a fraction of a second before laughing, a sound full of relief and disbelief. His laugh echoed through the chamber, cutting the tension like a blade. For the first time, Lyris noticed something she hadn't before: humor in the face of danger. It was reckless, audacious, and entirely human. The simulation ended, and cadets filed out, buzzing with whispered respect and surprise. Cade had survived, but more importantly, he had commanded and succeeded. Lyris remained silent as ever, her eyes following him as he stumbled slightly while adjusting his suit. He had not only defied expectations, he had drawn her attention, and more dangerously, her approval. She turned away quietly, though the faintest trace of a smile lingered behind her stoic mask. The silent observer had been challenged and, perhaps, changed by the audacity of a single human. The holographic battlefield stretched as far as the eye could see, a twisting landscape of jagged asteroid ridges, spinning debris fields, and neon plasma storms that crackled across the simulation sky. The air seemed alive with energy, humming with the threat of imminent destruction. Cadets froze at the edge of the arena, scanning the chaos. Every holographic drone that emerged from the darkness was a potential death sentence. Cade Wren's stomach clenched. He had faced simulations before, but nothing like this. Enemy swarms poured from multiple directions, their plasma bolts slicing through the air with deadly precision. Each step was a calculated risk. One miscalculation, and the mission would fail, or worse, cadets could be incapacitated. He swallowed hard, remembering Lyris's piercing gaze from the observation deck, silent, unyielding, yet somehow expectant. Failure was not just personal, it would be on him for leading the team. "Stick to formation," shouted one of the alien cadets, panic evident in the vibration of their limbs. "We'll never survive." Cade shook his head. "Forget formation. We'll survive by being unpredictable." His voice rang out, raw and urgent. He had no time for strategy manuals or protocol. Humans survived chaos by thinking outside it. He sprinted toward a broken ridge, ducking under spinning plasma arcs, then vaulted over a jagged wall, landing hard. Sparks from damaged energy panels erupted around him, illuminating his tense, determined expression. He signaled with sweeping gestures, improvising on the spot. "Split into pairs. Use the debris to flank. Don't engage until I give the signal." The cadets hesitated, instinct screaming caution. But Cade's audacity was contagious. One by one, they followed. Plasma blasts ricocheted, sparks arced, shadows danced across jagged surfaces. Cade ducked, rolled, and propelled himself across a narrow ledge, narrowly avoiding a collision with a holographic drone. Every heartbeat felt stretched, every move a gambled dot above him. Lyris leaned forward on the observation platform, her arms crossed but her eyes sharp and unblinking. She had seen elite cadets fail spectacularly, but this human thrived in unpredictability. Every unconventional maneuver, every improvised tactic, shifted the tide of the battle. She could not tear her gaze away. A wave of drones pressed closer, swarming like relentless predators. Cade's team was cornered against a simulated cliff, plasma bolts whistling past. His mind raced. He spotted a narrow tunnel in the asteroid wall too tight for standard drills. Too risky for cautious cadets. Through the tunnel. "Move now," he shouted. Cadets dove, barely squeezing through, sparks flying off suits as they collided with the walls. Cade followed, twisting and ducking as plasma bolts grazed his armor. One misstep, one hesitation, and it would have been over when they emerged on the other side. Unscathed and in formation, a stunned silence filled the arena. The simulation scored them not just as survivors, but as victors against impossible odds. From her vantage point, Lyris exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, but enough to betray her admiration. She had witnessed what she never expected, a human cadet converting chaos into strategy, transforming panic into triumph. Cade slumped against a jagged rock, panting, sparks flickering from his suit. For the first time, he looked up and met Lyris's violet gaze. She did not smile yet, but the acknowledgement in her eyes was unmistakable. Respect, curiosity, perhaps even something approaching fascination, in the vast, flickering The gear bay was quiet, lit by the flickering glow of overhead lights that hummed softly, casting long shadows across the metallic floor. The day's training exercises had ended, leaving behind sparks, smoke, and the faint smell of ozone. Most cadets had already returned to their quarters, but Cade, Ren lingered, hunched over a scattered pile of maintenance tools. Sparks danced across his gloves as he fumbled with an errant energy conduit, muttering under his breath. Lyris stood in the shadows, arms crossed, her violet eyes fixed on him. The hum of the bay filled the silence, punctuated only by the occasional hiss of Cade's mismanaged sparks. She had followed him here not out of necessity, but curiosity. After the impossible simulation earlier, her stoic exterior had been cracked, if only slightly. And now, she watched as the human struggled, stubborn and absurd in his persistence. Cade yelped as a stray spark jumped from the conduit, bouncing harmlessly across his chest plate. Okay, that's definitely not supposed to happen," he muttered, trying to wrestle the piece into place. Sparks arced again, flying over his shoulder, and he stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding a stack of alloy crates. Lyris's lips twitched. She told herself it was a reflex, an involuntary reaction, and not under any circumstances a smile. But something about the chaos, the human flailing yet refusing to surrender, struck a chord she hadn't felt in centuries. "Here," she said finally, stepping forward, her voice low and measured. "Not like that." Cade froze, eyes wide. "Commander, I wasn't expecting." He gestured helplessly at the tangled mess of wires. Lyris ignored his fumbling attempts at explanation. She knelt, deftly untangling the sparks and wires, with a few precise movements. The sparks ceased, and the room fell momentarily silent, except for the hum of energy grids. Cade blinked, stunned, then let out a nervous laugh. "You'll make it look easy," he admitted, rubbing his hands together awkwardly. Lyris straightened, her hands folded behind her back, and for a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then unexpectedly a sound escaped her lips. A soft, genuine laugh, delicate and unguarded, cutting through the sterile quiet of the bay. It was brief, almost hidden, but Cade froze mid-motion, staring at her in disbelief. You laughed," he said, his voice a mixture of shock and wonder. "I didn't think." Vakari commanders, even Lyris, raised a sharp brow, but said nothing, allowing him to struggle for words. Her eyes, however, glimmered with amusement. Watching the human's astonishment, as if savoring the moment. Cade shook his head, smiling despite himself. I guess I broke the rules. No, Lyris replied finally, her tone still calm, almost teasing. You challenged him, that is different. The absurdity of it struck Cade, and he laughed again, louder this time, the sound echoing across the bay. Lyris tilted her head, letting herself study him. In his clumsy humor, in his bold defiance of expectations, she saw something remarkable. A spark, a vitality humans carried effortlessly, something even the most disciplined warriors lacked. For the first time, the gap between observer and cadet narrowed. Humor, unpredictability, and audacity had begun to bridge it, and though she would never admit it aloud, Lyris felt the stirrings of something dangerous. Connection. The bay's shadows stretched around them. But in that fleeting moment, the room felt warmer, alive with energy beyond sparks and machinery. Lyris's usual stoicism had been pierced by a single human, and it left her quietly unbalanced in the best possible way. Red alarms blared across Crucible Base, painting the corridors in frantic scarlet light. Emergency sirens echoed off the metallic walls, shaking the entire asteroid training facility. Holographic enemy drones had breached the perimeter, an unprecedented event for even the most advanced cadets. Shadows danced across jagged metal panels, punctuated by the sharp staccato flashes of warning lights. Cade Wren froze for a heartbeat, his chest tight with adrenaline. The simulations had been chaos, yes, but this was real. The air smelled faintly of ozone and scorched circuitry, and the distant hum of energy shields hinted at the stakes. Any misstep now could mean failure, or worse, incapacitation in the worst-case scenario. Stay calm. Lyris's voice cut through the alarm, sharp and commanding. She appeared beside him, moving as silent and precise as a shadow. Her violet eyes scanned the approaching drones, calculating angles, distances, and trajectories with near-perfect speed. We move as one. Follow my lead. The human swallowed, nodding. His mind raced. Humans weren't perfect soldiers, they were improvisers. And improvisation, if harnessed correctly, could turn desperation into advantage. The first wave of drones swarmed the lower training deck, plasma bolts sizzling across the air. Cade's team of cadets scattered instinctively, seeking cover behind jagged metallic walls. Sparks from the damaged energy grids reflected off their armor, giving the illusion of a battlefield alive with fire and movement. Divide into pairs, Cade shouted. Use the shadows to flank. Don't engage until I give the signal. The cadets hesitated, uncertainty flickered in their alien expressions, but Lyris's presence reassured them. Her confidence was a shield, and her gaze seemed to promise that survival was possible if they trusted her. And Cade, he darted forward, weaving between spinning plasma arcs, narrowly avoiding a drone's volley. Sparks sprayed across the deck as he dove behind a jagged bulkhead. One misstep, one misjudged leap, and it could have been over. Lyris moved in tandem, silent and deadly, intercepting drones with precise strikes, clearing the path ahead. She glanced at Cade, briefly a flicker of acknowledgement, almost imperceptibly, but enough for him to feel her trust. They reached a choke point in the deck, where drones funneled through a narrow corridor. Cade spotted a set of maintenance conduits overhead, exposed and unguarded. Up there, he shouted, pointing. Use the conduits to bypass the swarm and hit them from behind. Lyris's lips twitched in the smallest hint of amusement. Predictable humans, yet brilliant in their audacity. She didn't argue. Instead, she coordinated with Cade, moving their team silently, swiftly, striking with precision. Plasma bolts ricocheted, sparks flying, shadows twisting across the walls in a chaotic ballet. Minutes or maybe hours passed in a blur. Every decision mattered. Every hesitation could be fatal. Cade's unconventional strategy turned the tide. The drones faltered. The cadets gained the upper hand, and the facility slowly returned to controlled chaos rather than catastrophe. When the final drone fell, silence descended. Smoke drifted lazily across the deck, casting hazy shadows on exhausted, adrenaline-fueled faces. Cade leaned against a wall, panting, sparks flickering from his suit. Lyris approached, violet eyes steady. She didn't smile, but her acknowledgement was clear. Respect, admiration, perhaps even trust. The silent observer had been forced to act alongside the human she had been studying, and in doing so, her stoicism had been pierced not by brute strength, but by ingenuity, courage, and audacity. Cade caught her gaze, grinning despite exhaustion. I guess we make a good team. Her lips twitched. Not a smile, not yet, but a subtle shift, a recognition. A bridge had been built, fragile but undeniable. Smoke curled lazily through the wide corridors of Crucible Base, illuminated by the flickering glow of warning lights and the sparks still dancing from shattered energy conduits. The battlefield of the simulation had faded, leaving only the aftermath's scattered debris, scorched metal, and the heavy thrum of exhausted cadets' breaths. The silence that followed felt almost sacred, broken only by the soft hum of residual power grids. Cade Wren leaned against a jagged wall, his suit still sparking faintly from the adrenaline-fueled battle. His chest heaved, sweat glinting on his forehead, eyes bright despite exhaustion. The cadets around him buzzed in quiet whispers of disbelief, and admiration rippled through the room. They had survived an impossible scenario. Against all odds, they had triumphed. From the shadows above, Lyris descended onto the floor with her usual silent grace. Her violet eyes scanned the aftermath, assessing every cadet's position, every spark, every detail of the battle. But this time, something had shifted in her demeanor. The stoic commander, who had once observed in silence, now carried a subtle warmth in her gaze, a recognition that Cade had not just survived, but had inspired. Cade straightened, brushing sparks from his armor. He looked up at Lyris, his grin weary, but triumphant. I guess we make a pretty good team, he said, voice echoing faintly against the metallic walls. Lyris's lips twitched slightly, almost imperceptibly. He took a cautious step closer, emboldened by the faint hint of amusement in her expression. You actually laughed earlier, he said, still incredulous. I didn't think Vakari commanders ever, and then it happened. A sound, rare and impossible to predict, filled the room. Lyris laughed, fully, genuinely, unrestrained. Her violet eyes sparkled with something new, something alive. The sound cut through the residual tension like sunlight piercing through storm clouds. And for the first time, the cadets didn't just see her, they saw her humanity. Cade laughed too, the sound mixing with hers, bouncing off the metallic walls in a harmonious echo of shared relief and exhilaration. Other cadets paused, caught in the surreal moment of witnessing the unthinkable. The silent Vakari commander had been moved by courage, by ingenuity, by human humor. You're impossible, Lyris said finally, still smiling, her voice carrying warmth and amusement, and reckless, and infuriating. And you aren't as cold as everyone says, Cade teased back, his grin widening. The tension that had defined their interactions melted away, replaced by a newfound camaraderie, a bridge of laughter and trust. They walked through the aftermath together, the sparks from damaged panels reflecting in their eyes like stars. Cadets who had once doubted the human's abilities now regarded him with quiet respect, and Lyris, the silent observer, had been transformed by a single human's audacity, humor, and refusal to yield. Above them, the dome of the training facility shimmered with artificial starlight, reflecting the calm after the storm. Cade paused, looking up at the endless stars projected above. I think we did it, he said softly. Lyris's gaze followed, thoughtful. Yes, she replied, tone clipped, but satisfied, against impossible odds. Humans have a way of surprising everyone. For a long moment, they stood together, cadet and commander, human and Vakari, laughter lingering in the air. The bond forged in chaos, humor, and shared triumph was more than just respect. It was recognition. Recognition that courage, ingenuity, and audacity could transcend worlds, and that even the most disciplined hearts could be moved by the simplest human qualities.